Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, yo! I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to episode 86 of Buha's Block. I'm thrilled to be joined today by, I believe, three-time guest now, Tim, aka Cranjis McBasketball, the Laker analytics king. Cranjis, how are you doing, my man?
I'm doing okay. I just dug myself out of the rabbit hole that I was just down looking at Mark Williams' Duke film, and ready to, you literally just broke a Lakers news to me with an acquisition or a conversion, and so I need to get up for a little bit of air. Happy to talk big picture and get a little bit out of the weeds, but I'm the right guy if you want to get into the weeds. So I hope everyone's locked in.
What we are ready to get into the weeds here. So you mentioned it, like, crazy last week. I'm running on fumes right now. I've not gotten any sleep. It feels like for going back to the beginning of the Grammy trip. So let's go back to last Saturday. The Lakers have this shocking trade for Luka Doncic. Honestly, one of the craziest trades in NBA history. Where were you at when the Luka trade happened, and what was your initial reaction?
Yeah, so my experience was I was laying in bed. My wife was asleep. I was just finishing up a Star Wars Clone Wars episode. And in between, I, wanted to check in, see how things were going. We had just had a big win against the Knicks, and I posted a couple videos, wanted to see how they were doing. And at the time in which I got online, it was past the initial wave of shock. And the first tweets I was seeing was, it's real, the trade's real, I can't believe this is happening. And so I'm scrolling through trying to figure out what the hell happened. And when I saw it, it was very late and I was a little delirious, but just shock, excitement, joy, sadness. Like, I think Max for me is someone that watched every game of his at Michigan State. It's been just a blast watching him kind of blossom into his role and be a solid contributing NBA player. And I'm so happy for him that he's going to land in a spot where he can continue contributing. And he's already winning over Mavs fans. AD has been such a huge part of just how we talk about the Lakers. And he was someone that I thought the team would be building around for the future. And so there's all of that sadness and like trying to process it, along with bringing in Luka, a guy that, like, I had a Mavs season ticket package for his rookie year and got to see him a bunch in person, and he is just phenomenal and incredible. And so a lot of mixed emotions, a lot of confusion. I quietly got out of bed, went downstairs. I'm doing a Discord server kind of like live reaction in my boxers with Tom and just trying to work through everything live. I don't think they were fully fleshed out thoughts, but we did a pod the next day. Big picture, I'm happy. I think the cost made sense. I mean, I'm not going to complain about it. I don't agree. I don't have any problem if Mavs fans want to complain about it. But yeah, I'm very happy on the Lakers side of things.
Now that we're about a week or so removed from it, what has been, like, as you've been fleshing out your thoughts, like what have you been contemplating? Like what's really been on your mind with Luka and just his fit? And I think specifically looking at the offense and him fitting next to LeBron and just that two-man game, how they're going to co-pilot the offense. Like what have you been kicking around these last few days?
I'm really excited that I think the team is going to immediately be much better against drop coverage, which has been an issue for them this season, both just from an execution and results standpoint, but also from a process standpoint. I think having a guy that can drill pull-up threes like it's nobody's business. Every season other than this year, by the way, he shot 30% this year. Every other year it's been like 38, 39, 40, 41. So if he can get back to what he usually does, that is just an immediate kind of built-in drop beating skill set, which helps a lot. It resolves a lot of the angst and issues I had with the scheme. So that's something I'm excited about. The fact that he is a strong ISO player, both from the perimeter and the post. Again, other than this season he's been poor from the post compared to his norm. So, if he gets back to his normal level, that is going to be a big mismatch nightmare for other teams. And just thinking about, like, how as an opponent do I allocate my resources? Where do I put my best defender? Who am I putting where? And there are going to be a lot of games where between LeBron, Luka, Austin, everyone you've got out there, someone's going to have just a built-in mismatch to go after, either on the inside or the outside or with ball screens. Maybe it's someone that's good on ball, but not great navigating ball screens. And so just how easy life should be and how high the floor should be is exciting to me. And then that two-man game, like you talked about, the synergy of having a guy like Luka that can draw two with a ball screen and then having him like dump it off to LeBron James as your short roll playmaker, it just does not seem fair. And so
it's like Team USA, like LeBron basically in that role with Steph. Yeah,
it's insane, dude. It's gonna be so good. What we're gonna see probably is teams try to switch and then get underneath LeBron as a roller and then load up the paint. And then it's gonna be a matter of how well do the Lakers run help beaters, which has been something that they've done poorly most of the season up until like the past week. And what I mean by that is when a team, let's say, double teams the post, the Lakers can either choose to just let that happen and try to play 1v2, which doesn't generally go well for them, or maybe kick it out and the defense usually recovers. You can still score, but usually they recover. Or you can run a choreographed help beating concept with screens and cuts to try to get good shots at the rim or create open catch and shoot threes. That kind of stuff is going to be critical for how I expect defenses to guard LeBron and Luka, because I think anything else, any hedging, any trapping, any drop, any just normal switching where you're not getting underneath the roll man, like you're going to have a lot of problems guarding this two-man game. And so I really only see one viable solution, which I expect most teams to work towards, especially in the playoffs, maybe not in the regular season, but how good the Lakers are winning that specific tactical battle is going to be really important for how far they can go. And so to me, that's just kind of what I've been thinking about for the past like 48 hours specifically.
And to your point, it's like if you have LeBron with a 4-on-3 advantage in the short roll, or you're having lineups where Austin Reaves is your third best passer and a second side guy kind of operating, running, whatever weak side actions you want to run. Like it's just their offense is going to be at such a high level. And looking at, so I think like the last 12 games have really been, I think, kind of the blueprint for what this team can be moving forward and just their ceiling and potential, so that they're 10-2, 7th in offense, 3rd in defense, 2nd in net rating. And they have multiple guys shooting around like 39% or higher on threes. And that's like with the current offensive system and offensive organization. And that's with AD missing some games and also a tougher strength of schedule over the stretch, being on the Grammy trip and playing the Celtics. And, so I think when you look at all those factors and how well they've been playing, you add Luka to this. It's just like, I think they have like, I don't know, top 3 offense upside, top 1. Like, I mean, I think it's like the ceiling, certainly on the offensive end, I think just goes to a different level.
Yeah, I think it's top 1 upside. You have post game, you have ISO game, you have great pick and roll pieces, you've got really good rollers with really strong roll gravity and as vertical lob threats. You have Austin, who's developed into an off-ball screen piece, and I don't think that was done with this move in mind. I think it was more done just because Dalton Connect wasn't succeeding in those opportunities, but that comes in really handy now because now you can still run your weak side pin downs and flare screens, exit screens that take the 4v3 you just talked about and turn it into a 2v1 with LeBron James catching the ball at the free throw line with one defender guarding the rim and also Dorian Finney-Smith in the corner or something like that. So yeah, dude, everything's on the table. You have all the chess pieces in the set, and how well you're able to win the chess match I don't think it's going to be limited by who's on this roster offensively. I'm so pumped to see it. I think there are things to nitpick, but yeah, really, really good fit. And then Mark Williams, a really excellent fit as well as a role man. So I think you've got what you would need. And if you would have approached me and told me about this trade and said, you can make this deal, but you are going to be like the 10 seed with 30 games left, I think I'd take it. And right now the team is the 5 seed, and they're tied in the loss column with the 3 seed. So I expect them to be better, and they're already in a very favorable position in the standings compared to, I think, what we're used to the past few years, where they're figuring it out late and digging themselves out of an early hole.
Well, you mentioned Mark Williams, so let's get into him. It was wild. So last night we spoke with Rob Pelinka. We had a small press conference before the game with the beat reporters, and similar to the Dallas trade, he said that after he did the press conference with Luka Doncic on Tuesday morning, he had several teams reach out because at the end of the press conference, he was asked about potential moves ahead of the deadline, and obviously the Lakers having a center need. And he said, like, it was almost a billboard for teams to reach out to the Lakers and try to find deals for centers. So Charlotte reaches out and offers Mark Williams, and they were really high on Dalton Connect going back to the summer. They considered taking him as high as number 6 in the 2024 NBA draft. So they viewed that as a chance of, we could get Dalton, we could get some picks, we will give up Mark Williams. So similar to the Dallas situation, LA was actually made the initial offer of, like, here's this player, are you interested in them? And then they negotiated it and came to an agreement in less than 36 hours. So Mark Williams was not a guy like on my radar. He was not a guy that was really out there in like the trade ether. I think a lot of people viewed him as a cornerstone alongside LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller in Charlotte as like just a guy they're going to build with. And he was really breaking out the last like 10, 11 games or so, averaging basically 20 and 12 and a block and a half. So what was your initial reaction to the Mark Williams trade? Was he someone at all on your radar? And with the price being what it was, with Dalton, unprotected first, and a swap, do you think that was like a slight overpay? And is it okay because you got Luka and that was a clear underpay? So it kind of evens out there. And like, if you really have a need with a contending team, it's okay to, like, that's kind of where I settle with it, is like, I'm okay with overpaying if you have a need and it is going to vault you into a certain status or level. And I think that's what the Lakers did.
Yeah, it's tough to say without knowing like what alternatives they had on the table. From afar, like, I think the deal in a vacuum, or not, maybe not in a vacuum, but if it's this or nothing, I'd rather do this rather than Jackson start and then have small ball backups or Koloko backup.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good move. For this one, I had a good night's sleep, woke up, and then saw it. Williams was not on my radar, just kind of for the same reason. He wasn't someone that was being talked about in this way. Charlotte, they moved Richards. I assumed they would keep Williams, but he's the right style of player. I immediately saw the fit. It makes sense. The first thing I did was pull up some of his like dunking film and lob film, and like, this is a guy that can get up, he can throw it down, and that is the right kind of center that you need with Luka, as Rob Pelinka shared. And so I like that fit there. The more I dug into him, the more, I see why it makes sense. I also see areas of concern, but at the same time, it's like, we can make that work. He's 23. He's not going to turn 24 until December, I think it is. The cost for him, initially, to me, it felt like a lot, but the more I thought about it, the more I was thinking, well, our first round pick is worth a lot less now than it was like a week ago or 2 weeks ago because of that Luka deal. I expect it to be a late first round pick. And so that plus Dalton, which I think keeping Austin and having a LeBron James and having a Luka Doncic, you have some like off ball defenders that maybe aren't, the best, not they're assets for their offensive game, not necessarily their defensive game. It's hard to have another off ball, very negative defensive piece. So his fit was worse on this team after the Luka trade, and Williams' fit is very obvious. And you have the upside of him being young. He's probably had his performance, and that, the performance ends up showing up in the data being worse than it probably could have been if he were a little bit more healthy. And his growth perhaps maybe had been stunted compared to what it could have been. And when I saw, I think Dave McMenamin report that someone within the Lakers thought that Charlotte was only scratching like 60% of what this guy could do, like, I see that. I see that on the film. He's still raw in a lot of ways. I think he still has a lot of growth to do, maturing to do, just technique to improve, like with his screening. And he has got some physical tools. He also has some physical limitations. But I see the fit. It makes sense because that first round pick is going to be less valuable. And I don't even know if that pick swap's ever going to happen.
Exactly.
Like, I'm cool with the cost for what it was. And it's a credit to Rob and I guess really just Rob for making sure the cost in the Luka trade was as low as it was to have enough ammo left over to make the second deal.
And I also look at it like you got a guy actually 8 months younger than Dalton Connect. So he fits the time, like, because I saw some of the initial reaction was like, well, we gave up on Dalton and the Lakers never developed young talent, or they always give up on their young talent. And I'm like, Mark Williams is actually 8 months younger. He's in his third season. And like, so he's younger and he's currently better than Dalton Connect. And he fits a critical need for the Lakers where the alternative was going to be Jackson Hayes starting. And I just don't think, or I think there was a limitation there as to the Lakers ceiling with Jackson Hayes being a mid to high 20s a night, like starting center. So, or just having to play small for half the game or more. So I just think it made a lot of sense. Like, yes, in a vacuum, the price was probably a little high, but I think when you have a chance to compete for a championship and the alternative was potentially not having that opportunity or really being capped at a certain level, I think Mark Williams makes a lot of sense. He does actually remind me, like, I mean this in a positive way, but like, he's kind of like a rich man's Jackson Hayes in some ways with the offensive. Jackson's more athletic and certainly there's more mobility and lateral quickness defensively. But like in the sense of like how he the rim running and the lob threat, he's obviously bigger than Jackson and overall he's better. He's a much better rebounder. But the defensive end is the one thing for me that like I'm still trying to figure out how that's going to look like because he does have high hips and long legs. And from a mobility standpoint, when you get him out onto the perimeter, you can blow by him. He has a tough time recovering, and stretch bigs, especially like watching some film on him guarding Brook Lopez, him guarding Jokic. Like he doesn't really go out to contest those guys. And those guys got a lot of open threes against him. And just his closeout technique is a little awkward. And so I think like he can block shots, and 9'9" standing reach, the largest ever recorded in the draft combine, or at least the largest currently in the NBA. Like I think he can block shots and be a rim deterrent when he's in the right spots, but it's about getting him in those right spots and also probably simplifying things so he's not having to rotate too much and kind of leave the paint. Because I think that's when you start to see some of the physical limitations, at least defensively. So what have you made specifically about his defensive capabilities and the defensive film, and how, with some of the concerns with the perimeter defense, at least with the projected starters and like the Lakers' best players, like how do you see that kind of fitting, and how the Lakers can try to maximize Williams' physical tools?
Yeah, so the hip fluidity stands out to me, or lack thereof. I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about him in drop and then recovering out to a pop. Just changing directions like that has been problematic. Him trying to be up in a higher drop and then trying to turn and recover to the roll man if the ball handler initially draws his attention has been problematic. He's long enough that he's able to make up for some poor technique or some other physical limitations, but like his rim defensive data is not good. He does have a good number of blocks. He's also one of the biggest defenders in the league when it comes to goaltends, which tells me that he's real close. And we see a lot of times where he gets blocks that were almost goaltends, and he gets goaltends that were almost clean blocks. If he can clean up some of the mobility over time, if he can work on his processing speed a little bit, like we might be able to see him snap into shape. I think that's more of a big picture thing, not necessarily something I'd expect to change all of a sudden on the Lakers. There are certain things with certain players you can point to and say, he's on a bad team, that's not a problem. On our team, I don't know that we can do that with his limitations. He still has the physical tools he had a week ago, and he's not a versatile defender. He's not someone I like on the perimeter. He is not someone that's really been used to switch much at all, despite being on a team that has been one of the switchiest in the NBA over the past 3 seasons. And so he is a very heavy drop big about 80% of the time. His rookie year, his second year, it was maybe, 30-ish, 30% soft hedging with the rest being drop. But these days it's mostly been drop. And I think that makes sense. And when we talk about his fit with, let's say, the starting lineup, if you are going to hedge, you need to have strong rotations behind you. And when I look at this Lakers squad and who's going to start, I think your like 3 and 4 man defensively are going to be Luka and LeBron. And I don't want to put the two of them in a bunch of stress when it comes to needing to rotate. Sometimes you have to rotate just because there's a breakdown, but I don't want to play a screen coverage that means the two of them are going to be having to rotate back and forth all day long. So the fact that he is more of a drop big, I think better fits the limitations slash wanting to keep those two guys healthy and rested for offense. And so for me, that makes some sense. I just hope we've got some good point of attack defense to navigate over screens and apply some back pressure. But yeah, he takes some things off the table from a coverage standpoint. Thankfully, with Jackson, you have the switching, you have the hedging. I think Williams could probably hedge. It's going to be more about who's behind him. And so if he's in the right lineup and he's got Vando and DFS and Rui or somebody, I don't know, like you can hedge with him and then they'll be fine on the back end. But yeah, I think he is a fit in terms of needing to play drop, but at the same time, that to me is a limitation that we're going to have with him. And he isn't one of the better drop bigs in the NBA because of just that positioning. For as long as he has like remarkably poor rim protection data. And it's
like 68% field goal percentage allowed at the rim.
Yeah, it's real bad, and
it's worse than Rui. Like I was looking at the Lakers rim protection data, and Jackson at 80 or both in the high 50s. Rui's at 67%, and it's not there's a lot of context that goes into that, but still, the fact that like Rui has allowed a lower field goal percentage at the rim is kind of telling.
Yeah, I agree. And like when in our B-ball index tools, just filtering down to only 7-footers. This is about as bad as I've seen, or about as I could find for rim protection for a guy that size. So he's got work to do. He's still very young. You can improve on some of these things, but I am seeing a little bit of like Bambi on film with him trying to move around, and he's actually pretty fluid on offense. Interestingly, when he needs to go in one direction and get the spin move going and stuff like that, he's got great hands.
It kind of reminds me of Rui and Dalton in some ways, where like they're athletic, or there's a clear like level of athleticism with them, but it translates far more on the offensive end than the defensive end. Like with Rui, you'll see him attack closeouts or get out transition or whatever, and he's got a certain level of pop and athleticism. Same thing with Dalton off the dribble, and they'll dunk on someone or have like an impressive finish. And then defensively, partly I think because of the hip mobility, but like the lateral quickness and stuff isn't quite there the same way it is offensively, and that's what I felt like with Mark Williams, because seeing like. He's even had some times where he's taken guys off the dribble, and just his ability, the catch radius, like you see the physical gifts and tools and like a level of athleticism there. And then defensively, it's like he's far more stiff and awkward, and it just doesn't really translate the same way.
Yeah, I'm seeing what you're seeing. We'll try to see what the team can clean up and improve. I think the one area to me that's low-hanging fruit is his screening technique. Every screen he sets, it looks like he's setting it with the idea in mind of like, I'm about to get the ball, let me turn around as quickly as possible. And so sometimes instead of setting a real screen where you have to go around it, he opens up and allows you to just go through where the screen was a half second ago. And so that doesn't do a good job of creating advantages. We often see him on film need to set like 2 or 3 screens in a row, just kind of flipping it back and forth until one of them works. And that's not going to fly. And that's something we heard JJ call out specifically. I believe last night when he was speaking to reporters. So to me, that is a more realistic thing to point at and say we can do better, he can do better, and he might be able to do better this season. The defense, I think, is going to be more of a long-term journey, and he's still been like a decent defender. His defensive impact in our D-LeBron data at B-Ball Index is a C+ compared to rotation anchor bigs. So it's fine. It's not great. I don't love it as a starting caliber guy, and I think the lack of versatility positionally and the lack of coverage versatility makes it so he's someone that you might be able to like play off the court in a playoff environment, and that could be part of the ceiling on the team this year, but I do think there's some interesting long-term upside with who he is and what he brings.
So with adding Luka and Mark Williams, how do you see the offense changing? Like what can they do now that maybe they couldn't do before, or what can they do more of? Like you are in the weeds with the Lakers offensive organization and play calling and coverage fit. Like how do you see some of those things potentially changing with, like LeBron said it last night. It was interesting. Like he was like, Luka could do everything I could do, and there's some things he could do even better than me. And you never hear LeBron heap that type of praise on another player. Like he's typically complimentary of guys, but hearing him say that Luka could do things that even he can't do, and maybe Luka's 25, he's 40, so maybe he's factoring in the age difference there. But like hearing that, it just thinking about like what those two guys can do with their size and their physicality and their playmaking and scoring and just isolation scoring, pick and roll scoring, post up ability, like all those factors with those two. Then you add in like Jackson has been playing well lately, and again, I think from a skill set perspective, there are some similarities between him and Mark Williams, especially with the ability to have a high catch radius and finish lobs and just kind of the way they position themselves. And then I think there's several things Mark does even better. So with adding those two pieces in specifically, like what are the things you think should change? What are the things you hope change? And again, I know we kind of hit on the ceiling offensively, but like specifically with some of the things that they're running with those two, how do you see that kind of playing out with the starting group?
I'll start with Mark because I think it'll be quicker. I don't know that he puts anything on the table that you didn't already have on the table with Jackson. I looked at every assist that he has had in college, the G League, Summer League, and the NBA. And it's a lot of handoffs. It's a lot of offensive rebound kickouts. And I'm not seeing a whole lot of short roll playmaking. I grabbed 14 plays you can consider him as a roll man, catching the ball, making a read. And 14 plays in like 7 seasons. That's not, or I guess 6 seasons. So to me, and he's played
to
with
a
LaMelo
season, that's not bad.
Yeah. I know you're high on Jackson's short roll playmaking, and I think I still disagree with you there. But I think the more the season has gone on, the more I'm like, yeah, Jovan's right. I think I was a little low on this guy. Williams, to me, I'm still questioning that piece of his game, but he does have like good assist volume. But all of our peripheral data at B-Ball Index says he's a fake playmaker. Don't buy into it. So I don't think he adds that element, and that was something I was at least curious about, hearing how other people talked about him. Offensively, he's a really good offensive rebounder. Not a great guy converting on putbacks, but he's going to get you some of those second chances.
So a lot of like wild, just like reaching up and like slapping, trying to like volleyball slap the ball.
Yep. Yeah, it's entertaining. We'll see how I feel about it when it's on my team, but yeah, he's gonna win you some rebounding battles.
It's kind of chaotic in a way, but like I think it can be positive at times, but a little chaotic out there.
His post film is sort of a nightmare. Again, just kind of the awkwardness, the uncomfortableness. He's got to refine that part, so I don't think he's going to add anything there. I see him as a roll and cut big, just like Jackson. They're both lob threats. I see it being kind of the same. He's just a better rebounder. On the defensive end, well, no, hang on, that's not your question. Let's go to Luka then. Luka does add things. Luka, I think, especially compared to what we've seen for the Lakers since the D'Lo trade, where we have seen more LeBron on ball. He and Austin have been the two team like primary initiators. I think we're going to see him a little bit more off ball again and more roll man LeBron. And we're going to see Luka draw two with ball screens, LeBron short roll playmaking. And we can see, like you said, like Luka can do a lot of what LeBron can do, if not, the same, if not better. We're going to see him operated out of the post, from the perimeter. I don't necessarily think, looking at the playbook, that you have to throw anything out. I'm not sure that there's anything that you couldn't do that you're adding back in, but I do think that you're in a better position now to run things where the threat of a pull-up three-pointer is part of what you're diagramming, where you're drawing in. So like stack action. If we think about some of those Ram step-up screens where, let's say, Mark Williams starts under the rim, Austin sets a screen for Williams under the rim to then go sprint up and get Luka a ball screen, and then Luka's looking to hit the pull-up three or attack downhill. And then as that's happening, Austin under the rim can go run off an exit screen to the corner. Things like that, where if you're hedging, the exit screen is going to break your rotations behind the hedge. If you're switching, Williams with that step-up screen now has an inside angle. You look to hit him for a dunk or LeBron for a dunk if he's the screener. And if the team's in drop, Luka's going to be able to hit some of those pull-up threes. And by using that Ram action to start, you are trying to force the defense into drop. So we should be seeing a lot of those shots. And if he doesn't take those shots, he's still going to be facing a guy that's sprinting all out to try to take that away and creating more drive opportunities for Luka. So I think just leaning on his threat of a three-point shot will be really important. And I think just in general, it's not necessarily that LA will need to run different things or ditch certain things. I just think the way teams will defend the Lakers is going to shift. Less drop, more hedging. And when I have the Lakers playbook categorized as like, this is how many plays have that drop beating concept, this is how many have a hedge beating concept, it's much more heavy on the hedge side. So I think we are going to see them put in better situations for what the playbook already is based on how teams need to defend Luka in the kind of on-ball gravity he has as a pick and roll player. So same sorts of things, they're going to work better, and you're going to see the better plays or the plays face the right coverages more often, I think is the way that I'm going to look at it.
I'm trying to wrap my head around Luka, LeBron, AR, three-man actions, stack actions. And it's like, especially with like LeBron and AR have developed their two-man chemistry over the last few years and really have gotten it to a point where like either one can be the ball handler or the screener. Austin, I think has had several games this season where when he's the screener and he's operating out of the short roll, he makes a lot of good things happen, especially when they faced some smaller lineups. Like I think back on the Christmas matchup and some of the reads he was making out of it. So just thinking like Luka having the ball and those two guys as screeners and cutters and then playmakers out of that, it's like it just feels like everything is open to this team offensively. And like I'm still trying to wrap my head of like what that's going to look like, and it seems like we're going to see it Monday against Utah for the first time. But like, I'm also like, what do you think of Luka off the ball and how they can use him? Because I do anticipate him probably leading the team in usage and being the primary ball handler, and that's going to be a shift for Austin and for LeBron. But in terms of Luka as a screener, Luka as an off-ball threat, how do you see that kind of playing out?
He'll certainly space the floor just fine. He's going to draw attention regardless of where he is. And, there will be times where the Lakers are taking turns, or maybe Luka's got the best defender of the other team on him, and it's Austin or LeBron that have just kind of where you want to be surgical and poke at as the offense. So we might see some times where it's just not his turn. He doesn't have the right matchup for it. He has decent screening data, I guess, at least. He isn't someone that we've seen used as like a short roll playmaker. He's never really been in those shoes. So I don't know that I expect a ton of ghost screens from him or a bunch of step up ball screens. I think it's going to be him more on ball. He's not the kind of athletic cutter that I think you will see that will create those sorts of looks the way that LeBron might or Austin can a little bit. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think we're going to see a ton of like Luka sprinting around off of pin downs and stuff like that. I think it's going to be more him waiting for the ball to get back to him. And while he's off ball, the defense still paying a lot of attention to him. And that just opening things up a little bit more for LeBron and Williams and AR and whoever else is trying to do whatever they're trying to do.
So overall, how would you grade this trade deadline?
I mean, it's hard to do better than this, right? Like, you are in great shape, not just this year, but for the future. You've added pieces that are part of the future. And so, like, I don't know, like an A plus, there's nothing I can really point at and be like, man, this move was bad. There are things Mark Williams is lacking in his game that, I would prefer a better player, but I don't think the Lakers could afford a better player after that first trade. And so this was probably the best they could do without moving Austin or Rui or one of these guys that's already part of their rotation. So I'm pleased. I think it's good for now and for later. I think it fits what LeBron wants and can extend his career. I think it fits with what JJ wants. I'm really happy with the organizational alignment on the Lakers side between the front office and coaching staff from what I can tell from the outside. And so, yeah, I mean, I think this is an A or an A plus. And I mean, this is the Los Angeles Boy Scouts moving forward, because they're going to be prepared against anything you throw at them tactically with the pieces they have on the court now.
I couldn't agree more. I said earlier in the season, if they put at least one, if not both picks on the table, I like, barring like an insane move that just doesn't make sense, I'm going to have no complaints about what they do. They put both picks on the table. They put AD on the table. They put Max on the table. They put Dalton on the table. And they went out and got Luka and Mark Williams and DFS, who I think is a guy who, he's got a player option for next year, but they could extend him, re-sign him. Like, he could be here for another few years. So I think it just, yeah, like overall, it's harder to conceive of the trade deadline going any better. But you touched on the starting lineup, and you were specifically talking about Luka and LeBron defensively. But with the starting lineup, I think there's four guys who I'm penciling in or even penning in as starters: Mark Williams, LeBron, Luka, Austin. Who do you have as your ideal fifth guy, and what are the factors that you're weighing on both sides of the ball?
Yeah, for me, I'm looking at, I guess, either DFS or Vando is where my mind immediately goes, and thinking through what roles do I need to fill. I think a question that's open to me, and I don't know what your thought is on it or if the Lakers know yet, but is Austin going to be a point of attack defender, or is he going to be more of a chaser and we're going to see Vando or DFS, like, who I don't think they're best in that role, but I think that might be what the Lakers have to do. If that's what we're thinking, then I think that's, I don't know. I'll say DFS, stick him at the point of attack. I don't love it. I think he provides what you want offensively with the spacing.
What do you think of his performance against Steph last night?
Oh, I don't like him chasing around off-ball screens. Like, he tries, but yeah, I think you're going to need to be switchy or try to top lock a bunch. It's just not, screen navigation on and off ball is not his game. He's a wing stopper. I want him on your LeBron Jameses of the world. I don't know that I want him on your Steph Currys or your John Morants or your Luka. Yeah. So yeah, he's got his limitations with Vando. Like, to me, Vando, if you're going to use him as a point of attack defender, his weakness is also navigating screens, which I think the ideal way to use him is either as a wing stopper, where that's not as much of an issue, or at the point of attack, and then you're switching. And he still has great size. But the thing is, Williams doesn't really fit with that. So if Jackson were starting, I think Vando makes more sense at the point of attack, and then you can switch more easily because Hayes has some mobility, Vando still has some size. But if Mark Williams is starting and I need to be in drop coverage, I almost start thinking about like, what is it, 40% 3-point shooter recently, Gabe Vincent, and how good he is navigating ball screens, staying in front, and spacing the floor on offense. So I think there are a number of guys that you can point at, and if Austin is able to defend well at the point of attack, I think DFS is an easy guy to slot in at that 2 spot. If not, and I need someone at the point of attack and Williams is starting, I think it's between Gabe and DFS, and it might be dependent on the matchup or the style of the other team, but that to me is where my mind goes. I don't really think Rui, with what he brings and what his limitations are, I don't see the fit from a defensive role standpoint for him. So yeah, I think Gabe or DFS. I'll assume they go with DFS, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Gabe end up in like a closing lineup or starting against certain teams or starting 20 games from now.
I think with Rui, it just really the only argument you can make for Rui is like, if you really just want to lean into the offensive end and just say we're going to try and drop 130 on you every night, and having him, I think overall he's a better offensive player than DFS, Vando, or even Gabe. But that's really it. I think that's like the only argument you can make. I do look at that position as like, I think you have plenty of offense with Luka, LeBron, Austin, and Mark Williams. Like, I need more of a defensive guy. The one thing with Vando too is that he's still on a minutes restriction. JJ said last night he's right now the total that they're trying to aim for is 18. He said that he views it as like a soft minutes restriction, and that like if he needs to play Vando 22 minutes, he could go a little bit over, but right now they're trying to keep his minutes and workload around 18 minutes a night, which you can make work as a starter. Like you can Keith Bogans it and have your kind of placeholder guy, but I think ideally he's probably better off the bench in terms of kind of being like that change of pace, just jolt of energy coming in and disrupting things the way that he's been doing lately. And then you can close with him depending on the matchup and how he's playing or where his minutes are at. So I think I'm with you between DFS and Gabe. The one thing what was starting Gabe is that I do think it shifts. It kind of shifts the identity of the lineup a little bit towards being smaller, and you do now need more from LeBron and Luka from a rebounding perspective, from a low man perspective, and you're still going to need plenty from those guys, but I do think with Gabe's size limitations as a rebounder, as a guy that teams can sometimes target within the Lakers switching scheme, I just think it puts a lot more on Luka and LeBron defensively and Mark Williams. And I would like to have ideally another guy helping those guys out. So I think overall the guy who checks enough of the boxes that need to be checked is DFS. 40% 3-point shooter, multi-positional defender, boxes out, plays with a certain level of physicality. Like I think Dorian is probably the guy, even though like really the guy they could use is Max Christie.
I was just about to say.
The unfortunate part of the Luka trade.
Yeah, I'm with you. Max is the perfect, like the hole we have in the starting lineup is a Max Christie sized hole. What he brings offensively and defensively is just, it's what you need. You need just a guy that can space on offense. He can crash, he can cut a little bit, mix it up on the inside, occasionally. Defensively, we need a guy that can stay in front, has good length, has enough size as a rotator and a rebounder, and can also navigate ball screens. And I don't think anybody checks all of those boxes, but DFS checks enough of them, or at least enough of the important ones, that he makes the most sense. And I do still see this as an issue and a concern for me with this team if they want to go deep in the playoffs, is, there's vulnerability there. And how far they're able to go this season is going to be limited, I think, a bit by that Max Christie absence. And long term, you could be fine. But yeah, to me, this is something I'm actively thinking about. And from a tactic standpoint, what can we do to work around this? And it's going to be tough.
We've touched on Austin, but I think it might be time just to touch on him a little bit more, because I'm constantly live streaming, answering viewer questions, and one thing that keeps getting lobbed at me is like, should Austin be starting? And should he be coming off the bench? Should he be embracing the Manu role? And because they added such a dominant ball handler, playmaker in Luka, does it make sense? Kind of similar to when Austin was ascending earlier in the season, and LA moved D'Lo to the bench, and he was kind of more the sixth man, backup playmaker. Does it make more sense to put Austin in that role? In terms of him starting and the possible fit there with him next to LeBron and Luka, and then also just in general, like Austin's kind of role within this team in terms of like he had become a pretty good playmaker, and like he had really shown some growth on that end over the past couple months, and it basically has been a 20-8 guy for going on 2 months now, and I think had ascended into that clear number 3 role, but really like the number 2 role in terms of ball handling, and even sometimes the number 1 role as more of a primary playmaker, and LeBron playing a bit more off the ball. So with Luka coming in, how do you see Austin's role and importance shifting? And do you think there's any argument to him potentially coming off the bench, or can he maybe go back to doing some of the things he did earlier in his career as more of an off-ball guy, more of a catch and shoot, spot up, weak side, secondary playmaker, and then defensively, because he's doing less offensively, now he can step up and I think take on some of the assignments that he took on earlier in his career, and actually fared, I think, fairly well for a guy with some of the physical limitations he had. Like, I don't think he was this like glaring negative defender for his first 3 seasons. I think certainly matchups and certain things, he could be exploited, but for the most part, I actually thought he was a plus defender through his first 2.5, 3 seasons. So with the whole Austin conversation, where are you at with his role around Luka and LeBron, and in terms of starting and just how he fits? How do you see it?
Yeah, I think offensively his game's scalable. He can be a spot-up guy. He can be an off-screen guy. He can, catch and be a really good connecting piece. He can extend advantages, create advantages, finish advantages, space, run ball screens. He's going to fit in if, let's say, a team happens to have good wing defenders for both Luka and LeBron, and if they run a ball screen, the switch doesn't get you much. Maybe Austin has a guard on him, and you can run ghost screens with him or inverted ball screens with him. And so he keeps enough options on the table in the rare event that a team does have the right personnel to defend Luka and LeBron real well. And so I like just the scalability with his game. I think it may differ night to night based on who the opponent is and what we want to pick off of the buffet of really good options with this Lakers offense moving forward. Defensively, you're asking the right question. I don't know the answer to it. I can confirm that early in his career, he was performing better. He was doing less on offense. Maybe he had more energy on defense. If he can get back to that game and be a solid defensive piece that offensively is just a super, super plus guy as a ball mover, off-screen shooter, and maybe not a super plus off-screen shooter, but really strong ball mover, secondary playmaker. I think it can make sense. I would expect to see him start to like the next game when Luka is playing, but I do think there is an argument that if Austin can't just shift his attention and energy and kind of proportionately increase his defense with the scaling down on offense, there may be times in general, or maybe in like closing lineups where you know he's going to be an off-ball piece, where it makes more sense to have Gabe and DFS out there with LeBron, Luka, and Williams, just knowing the ball's going to be in one of the hands of Luka or LeBron, and we'd rather have just 3-and-D pieces that, yeah, maybe they're going to be worse at secondary playmaking, but they give you a little bit more on the defensive end. And just given what the role is offensively, we don't want to take the ball out of Luka's hands. We don't want to take the ball out of LeBron's hands. So I can see that argument. I am going to be very carefully reviewing the Austin defensive film upcoming, because if I don't see that shift for him, I think I am going to get more and more comfortable with the idea of him coming off the bench. I still think he should play a bunch. I still think he's a very good player and he can do all these great things, but like it's Luka Doncic, so he's going to have to take a back seat in that regard. And as long as he is taking a back seat and his impact is lowered because of that offensively, we have to see that growth defensively, or he may not be worth it as much compared to just plugging in another guy that is a worse talent, a less talented guy, but a better defensive player.
That's my sense too. I've been saying, like, I think he's going to continue to start. I think they're going to give him a shot to see what it looks like and give it a bit of a sample size. But within 2 to 3 weeks, see does the team, is the starting defense just like not good enough? Like, are they losing those minutes? Like, what does that look like? And then you can reevaluate and potentially go, I think, to what you said, like Gabe and DFS. And now you have 2 3-and-D, like one point of attack guy, one wing guy, Mark Williams, LeBron, and Luka. And like that starting lineup does make a lot of sense. Like, I also think anytime we have these conversations, like there's always the human element of it. And the Lakers love Austin. They obviously have not wanted to trade Austin. They viewed him as a longer term piece. And I think he's earned a starting spot. Like, he's clearly been their third best player all season. And I think there's been a pretty decent size gap between him and whoever you want to put at number 4. So I think from like that standpoint, I think he's going to get the first crack at starting. And even if he comes off the bench, I think he should easily be like a 30+ minute a night guy because of just how good he is. And I still think, regardless of any fit concerns, like from a talent perspective, again, whoever you want to put at number 4, I think there's a decent gap there. So we'll see. But it is something to monitor as I think it'll take a few games for everyone to get acclimated and start to kind of figure out the pieces with the puzzle. But if we're 2-3 weeks in and the starting lineup is like net neutral or like barely positive and they're really struggling on defense, that's when I think the JJ and the coaching staff have to take a look at that and potentially make some changes. A couple more here before we get you out of here. Lakers have an open roster spot now, so that was a benefit to the Mark Williams trade, or an additional benefit. What do you think they need with their final roster spot? Is there a player archetype? Is there a position? Is there a skill set? And are there any targets out there that you like that fit whatever you think they need to add?
So I think point of attack defense, certainly interesting. Maybe a 2-guard, and we saw, was it Jordan Goodwin? Is that who they converted? So he's a potential answer, but on a 2-way, so not taking up that spot. I think they might continue to kind of see the field of available options and see if they can add someone that is a good just kind of 3-and-D piece, which is an easy thing to say, a hard thing to find and add. A Christian Wood.
They're not finding Max Christie on the buyout market.
Exactly. So yeah, they're going to be limited. They can't grab anyone who is making above the MLE. Who they can get is we'll have to wait and see. The idea of Christian Wood, I think, would be interesting again. I don't know if and when he'll ever be healthy and if he would play for this team, but if not, that might be another spot they cut and try to fill with someone else. But someone that could be versatile with coverages, have some size and rim protection, but also be able to switch or hedge just because of Williams' limitations and his lack of coverage versatility. To me, if I'm looking at making a playoff run, I need to build a team that can play different ways and can play different styles of defense. And if I have a starting big that is really only a drop guy and I'm in a series where drop's not going to cut it, I need to make sure I have more than one viable backup center. And I think Jackson provides the mobility to hedge, to switch. And hell, if you want to switch, you might start Vando at the point of attack, Jackson at the 5, DFS at the 2, and you've got LeBron and Luka, or maybe Austin's at your 2 guard. I then question, if Williams isn't going to play more than a couple minutes a game in this theoretical series, who else do you have? And I don't really think I feel comfortable with the other options. So there is still a theoretical need for a backup 5 that has that certain skill set that is a little bit more mobile. If not that, I think point of attack defense is what I'd be looking at, because I think you've got plenty of playmaking at now. You've got a number of spacers, so it's not like shooting above all else. I would love someone who can stay in front on defense and navigate some ball screens, if I were to pick one thing.
I think they need a shooting guard. That's where I'm at. Ideally, to your point, a guy who can be a point of attack defender. And I think one thing that stood out to me, and I made this point last night on my post game reaction to the Lakers Warriors game, was like, just right now, I think there's a general like lack of perimeter defensive quickness, and that's, I think, arguably the area that they miss Max the most in. And just Golden State runs their offense a certain way. They have certain types of players, and with the synergy between Draymond and Steph, like, it's a very unique matchup that can't really be replicated across other teams or other lineups. So I like, with that caveat, I kind of like preface it with that, but I thought they gave the Lakers a lot of problems with their split cuts and just some of the side to side movement and just the quickness of their players, the quickness of their decision making. And you saw guys like DFS, like Vando, like Austin, kind of put in positions where, just from a foot speed perspective, they didn't quite have the ability to match up with some of those smaller guards. And again, not every team plays like Golden State, but when looking at OKC or Cleveland or even Memphis or Houston, like some of these teams that have quick, athletic, smaller perimeter guys, like that could be a bigger picture concern for this group deeper into the playoffs, as it turns into a chess match. So I think if I'm scouting the Lakers, like, that's one thing I'm trying to attack, is like, okay, yes, they got some big wing defenders in DFS and Vando and even LeBron when he's engaged, and like, they got some size at the rim with Mark Williams and Jackson, and even Gabe could be a good point of attack guy, but like, overall, there's not a lot of foot speed here. And I think that's the way you try to attack them, with quick actions, quick screening, split cuts and different things. So like, that type of guy, I don't think you're going to find, again, Max Christie on the buyout market or the free agent market. But if you can find a guy who can at least be like a decent 9th or 10th man option that has some of that, like maybe for those specific matchups or stretches of those matchups, you can kind of use that guy for like 10 to 15 minutes as sort of a stopgap defensively with like bench units.
Sure.
So I think that's the one thing. And then to your point with Christian, like, if Christian can't go, like, I mean, we're getting to the point where we're 2 months away from the playoffs almost. Like, they got to make a decision there. And I'd even rather have Christian Coloco just converted at a minimum and just have him as an option, rather than just have Christian Wood not being available. So I think potentially you could see maybe they waive him and add a big, and then also add this 2 guard to the 15th spot.
Yeah, I could see that. I'd be happy to have Coloco if not Wood, if he's not able to play. Looking at, just trying to find names potentially to fit what we've been talking about on the guard side. Jaden Springer, maybe, if he could hit some threes, but he hasn't been able to hit threes. Dennis Smith Jr., same problem for him. Good defender, can't hit his threes. I don't know, man. Like, Trey Jones, I don't know if he'd ever get bought out. He's a little bit more viable as a perimeter shooter, but still not good. Those are, I think, the kinds of guys that you just may throw a dart at and hope that they can get hot or hit a wide open stationary corner 3 every now and then. Because, yeah, I don't know. It's going to be tough. We'll have to see who becomes available, but I'm aligned with you in terms of what those skill sets look like, and I'd imagine the Lakers are pretty clear on what they need. I feel like they have very easy holes to see, and then other areas where like we don't need a wing defender. We have plenty of guys that size that'll play that position, and if we add another one, I don't know who we're taking out of the rotation or where they go. So yeah.
Because also, I mean, Luka's more of a forward defender, like that.
Oh yeah, he
than
guards
anything,
threes and
right?
fours.
Like you're not putting him on a guard. So,
Yeah, he's a point guard offensively. He guards threes and fours defensively, and his defensive role has been as a helper. He's an off-ball guy, rotating. He's actually had like decent rim protection data this year as a rotator. So good for him. I don't know if that'll continue, but yeah, you need someone who can guard guards.
Last one here. So zooming out, looking at the big picture with this team, what do you think is their ceiling? Do you think this is a group that can make the conference finals, make the finals, win a championship? What do you think is the upside of this group as it stands? And let's just assume that they find, again, most of the time with the buyout market and free agency mid-season, like you're not finding a truly impact player. I think a lot of that stuff is like overstated. And when you look at championship teams, finals teams, they rarely have buyout or free agent guys like playing a big role within the final 7 or 8 man rotation. But let's just assume they add someone that can at least like plug a little bit of that hole. What do you see as the upside of this group, and where currently would you put them in the West pecking order?
Ooh, okay. So I don't see this being a team that can win the title. I see too many holes defensively. I don't see the kind of defensive versatility from a coverage standpoint that I think you would need if I'm looking at attacking this team. If Williams is only going to play drop, that's not going to work well against a number of teams. If you're going to be able to pull him out onto the perimeter and pull him away from the rim, now you have not very good rim protection behind him. So go stick him in the corner and look to attack. Like Luka, LeBron, those are guys that you can try to attack on ball, but then also by trying to put them in rotation is often how we see teams try to attack Luka. I can't tell you how many games I sat there in person in Dallas and like Luka was just not getting the job done as a rotation guy, and it wasn't pull him into the action to defend on the perimeter because you can try to shrink the floor and help him out there. It's make him the low man and know he's not going to rotate, and that's how you beat those Dallas defenses. So that's something that worries me. I think the Lakers have enough pieces that with Hayes, with Vando, like you can try to add some more defense, some more mobility, but I see that being a limitation. But offensively, this team has a lot of firepower. They have plenty of time here to figure things out. It's not like we've got 10 games left. They've got a full 30-ish games. So I expect to see a top 3 offense for the rest of the year, something along those lines. But the defense to me is worrisome, and you can no longer say, you know, Anthony Davis is incredible. He can do every coverage. He can make up for things. We don't have that guy anymore. And so I think this is a group that can, with the right matchups, make it to the Western Conference Finals. But at the end of the day, like I'm not picking them over OKC in a series. I still think Denver's a handful. I think I'd like the Lakers enough in that series. Houston can be a pain in the butt with how they defend with switching. And if the Lakers scheme is on point with the help beaters, they're vulnerable. If not, then that is another one where I could see a lot of jump shots not going in, single shot possessions, and then Houston running on the other end. Memphis is dangerous. I think this team can be as high as like the second or third most dangerous team in the West, but the defense for me is my biggest barrier for the rest of this season.
That's fair. I think I have them. I may be a little bit more optimistic than you are, just because of I'm a big believer in talent in the playoffs, and like I think if you are holding a draft of like, I think there's the like player rankings of where guys slot just like kind of overall or in the regular season, and then I think there's like a different level to it in the playoffs. And I think you could make the case, in my opinion, that like LeBron and Luka are top 4, top 5 guys in terms of like, if we're ranking guys I have confidence with in a playoff, 7-game series. Like, I mean, Luka to me is probably number 2 behind Jokic. And then I think LeBron, despite not necessarily having the regular season bandwidth or workload as some guys that I think are ranked ahead of him, I think you can make a case for LeBron as high as like 4 or 5. And I think I would put Giannis ahead of him. And then once we start getting into like the Shea Tatum range, I don't think it would be wild to see LeBron like outplay those guys in a series. Like maybe, Shea's at a certain level where maybe you slot LeBron at like number 5, but Lakers having 2 of those guys, I just think that there's the possibility that like against Memphis and Houston, they're going to most likely have the 2 best players on the floor and in that series. And like, I do think in a 7-game series, that stuff matters, especially if you have just a competent supporting cast. Like we've seen Luka carry and have success with, I think, worse groups than this one. We've seen the same with LeBron. And I also think LeBron's level of defensive engagement the last 2-3 weeks has been really encouraging. And just like you see when he wants to ramp it up and play at a certain level, he could still do it. Last night might have arguably been his best game of the season. Like it was in that conversation. So I think they could get to the finals. I do think they could win a championship. I just think the challenge of like potentially beating an OKC and then beating a Boston and a Cleveland, like I don't know if it might take too much out of Luka and LeBron, and it would have to be kind of similar to like LeBron's Cleveland days where it's just like superhuman performances that you're really carrying the team. I think they can maybe do like one of those series. I don't know if they could do 2 of them. So I think they can make the finals. I think they're in a conversation to win the championship, but I still would comfortably put OKC, Boston, and Cleveland ahead of them. So I think you could argue them as high as 4, but probably somewhere 4 to 6.
Yeah. I think offensively, they'll be able to do what they need to do. I worry about like, how do we defend a SGA Chet pick and pop ball screen with Mark Williams? How do you defend Jaren Jackson Jr.?
I mean, you probably go. I assume they're going to go small a lot. I think that okay. the way this goes is like the ultimate version of this team is probably LeBron, Luka, Austin, and then like Vando? Dorian and Vando. Okay. I guess Dorian and Vando. Yeah.
Okay. I can see that.
What do you think about that? Because the small, like against New York and the Clippers, and even last night, I thought the small ball minutes looked pretty good.
I think so. And we've seen a lot of improvement from the team over the past maybe 3 weeks when it comes to defensive tactics and also technique as a switching defense, sending help, shrinking the floor. For most of the season when the Lakers were switching, they were allowing roll men to get underneath the switch, and they were giving up really good looks that way. What they've been doing more recently is being physical, getting underneath that roll man, taking the easiest way to attack switching away. And then if the other teams try to ISO, really trying to shrink the floor, almost build a wall in front of the ball handler and force them to hit jump shots over you. That's vulnerable to help beaters, which, as I've learned from Houston this season, which basically just does this every game, not a lot of teams are very smart and run help beaters consistently, so you can get away with this. But is that viable for a title run? Maybe not. But I hadn't thought through that group. I think maybe you could squeeze out a Western Conference Finals, get to the finals. But I agree, like beating quality team after quality team is going to be a challenge because I still see some holes, and I don't know if that same small ball answer can beat all of them. But at the same time, like you got a great short roll playmaker with Vando. He can crash the boards. You've got plenty of shooting, spacing, ball handling, passing. I think it's going to be a fun group. I think this is not a group we can write off. We saw what Luka was able to do a season ago without Dallas roster. Yeah, I'll be cautiously optimistic, but I think if you had
there we go. There we go.
Man, you're talking me into it. I'm still going to say Western Conference Finals is the ceiling, but if in like the first 5 games we see a small ball group operating well, like you're talking about, then I might start getting more confident.
There we go. Well, Cranjis, thank you so much for your time. You're far too kind. Where can the good people watching and listening follow you that are not yet following you, that should be? And where can they listen to your great Lakers Exceptionalism podcast?
Yeah, so you can find the pod everywhere. You can follow it on Twitter at LakersXPod or LakersXPod, whichever, it depends on how you capitalize the letters. We've got a great community in there with the Discord group if you want extra bonus content. I've been tracking every play the Lakers run offensively, and so I've got a tracker there. I have about 24 hours worth of X's and O's like A to Z courses if you're looking at getting smarter with the game. So if you want to, pay $15 and get some extra pods, a scheme course, and a Lakers tracker to see, what play was that? Oh, here it is. How well has that play worked against drop versus switching, whatever. You got all that content in there. So go check that out with the Lakers Exceptionalism podcast. You can follow me on X at Tim_MBA, and go check out B-Ball Index if you're not familiar with it already. It's been a great resource for me as I'm seeing trades happen left and right, and I'm trying to get familiar with players. You can pull up our player profiles and immediately get a really good, quick look at what is the player good at, what are they bad at, what do they do, what is the context around them. This guy's had really good shot quality or really bad shot quality. How good are their teammates? What does the spacing look like around them? All sorts of fun basketball questions that we're able to answer with some solid data. So check that out, B-Ball Index on X. And we have a $5 data package where you can get all of this great stuff, all these wonderful resources at your fingertips. So go give that a look if you haven't already.
I consider myself an in the weeds person. Tim is someone who's in the core of the earth. He is that deep in the weeds. So no one covers the Lakers better from a data analytical and just, I think we had a great conversation, really kind of, fleshing out a lot of this stuff with what this group is going to look like and what they did at the deadline. So check out everything that Tim just plugged. I will also put links in the show notes. But thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I will be back Saturday afternoon after Lakers Pacers. We'll see if Luka makes his debut. I doubt it. It's seeming to be trending toward Monday, but Mark Williams could potentially be making his debut. So we'll have a lot to talk about. Either way, I will talk to you then.